Hi, this is Asian Insider. I'm your host, Nirmal Ghosh, and today we focus on Myanmar, a country of 53 million people in a state of civil war whose economy is in a state of collapse. So it's hard to see a scenario in which there are so many armed groups involved in conflict transitioning from a state of pretty much perpetual war to no war. I mean, Michael, what do the principal actors in Myanmar want? Is there any momentum at all for a negotiated peace, and what could that possibly look like?
Well, the consensus on what people want is essentially goes back to a promise made at the dawn of the country's existence by one of the founders of independent Burma, as it was then, for a federal democracy, a federal union. I found that there was a lack of vision among Myanmar political actors and all the constituent elements of the country. I mean, they rarely came together to discuss actually what they wanted. There was a heavy emphasis on process and the formalized process of negotiation, whether it's a ceasefire or talking about eventual federalism, but not a great deal of consensus building about what people actually wanted, and not a lot of asking of what people actually wanted. A very top-down, government-driven process, extremely formal, and lacking very often in substance. I don't know. I felt that even in the good times, when negotiations were underway, they were not very substantive, and they didn't really improve the situation at all.
I think some of those really big questions were put off a little bit with an expectation that once things got a bit better in Rakhine, once the economic reforms started to become embedded and so on, that some of those big questions, the existential questions of the state in Myanmar, would come back on the agenda. But of course, that never came. So, and
I think it's very, very important to state, Nirmal, that one can't underestimate the tremendously deep, long-lasting levels of mistrust between the constituent elements of the country. But there are still very deep levels of mistrust it's not even towards the military as such, it's of Bamar people by the non-Bamar people. I've seldom seen in Southeast Asia that level of mistrust between groups. I mean, it's there in Malaysia between Malays and non-Malays, in Indonesia, Muslims, non-Muslims, but, they rub along. And there's a degree of consensus about sort of pluralism. But in the case of Myanmar, that pluralism is so problematic. Deep reservoirs of mistrust makes it very difficult to have those visions of the future.